Welcome to Signal 91.6. Somewhere out there, buried beneath the snow, there's a small radio station that shouldn't still be on the air. Every night, one lonely DJ sits behind the microphone, speaking into the static to no one or maybe to something. Then one stormy night, between the static and the silence, a voice answered back. A signal appeared on a dead frequency, 91.6 FM, but it wasn't just broadcasting, it was listening. And if you can hear it now, it means the signal has already found you. The wind had been howling for hours, scraping and rattling the weathered windows of the small radio station nestled on the edge of town. Outside, the snow piled high, thick and relentless, turning the familiar streets of Millersfield into a ghostly labyrinth of white. Inside the cramped booth, I sat hunched over the control board, my breath fogging the glass as the soft blue light of the dials flickered in the dim room. It was one of those nights where time seemed to stretch thin, each minute dragging on under the weight of the storm. I'd been running the late shift at WRML, the town's modest radio station, for the past 6 months. What started as a way to pass the winter evenings had turned into a ritual, spinning old rock records, reading out local weather updates, and occasionally chatting with the few night owls still brave enough to answer the phone. Tonight, though, even the usual callers were silent. The snow had cut off the town, and the world beyond seemed to have vanished under the ice and wind. I flicked through the FM dial, the static crackling in my headphones like the sound of distant thunder. Most frequencies were dead or filled with the usual interference. But just as I was about to resign myself to the endless white noise, a flicker of something caught my ear. At 91.6 FM, there was a faint, wavering signal, barely more than a whisper buried in static, but unmistakably there. I leaned closer, adjusting the tuner with a shaky hand. "Stay inside. Danger near," a voice rasped, distorted and fragmented. The words were broken, as if transmitted through a faulty connection, but they sent a chill crawling up my spine. I spun the dial back and forth, trying to catch more of the message, but the voice vanished as quickly as it had appeared, swallowed again by the hiss of white noise. "What the hell was that?" I muttered to myself, heart thudding. I checked the station log, but no one had reported any broadcasts on 91.6 before. It was supposed to be a dead frequency, unused, forgotten. I tried to push the thought aside and focus on the next record, but the image of that faint voice lingered in my mind like a shadow. The storm outside pressed harder, a relentless force that seemed to silence everything except the wind's mournful cry. I glanced at the clock on the wall, midnight. The town was cut off, stranded beneath a mountain of snow, and the radio waves, usually a lifeline, were eerily quiet except for that strange frequency. I decided to record the broadcast, letting the tape run as I monitored 91.6 FM. Minutes later, the voice returned, this time clearer but still fractured. "Red house, basement. Watch." The words made no sense, but the urgency was palpable. I fumbled with the volume, trying to catch any other clues, but the signal was unstable, flickering in and out like a dying ember. My mind raced. Was this some prank? A lost transmission from another station? Or something else entirely? I called Eddie, my best friend and occasional co-host, hoping to share the weird find, but his phone went straight to voicemail. Probably the storm again. The isolation was starting to weigh on me, a thick fog of loneliness that settled deep in my chest. I spent the next hour scanning the frequency, scribbling down the fragments of messages as they came, warnings, cryptic phrases, and names I didn't recognize. Some were chilling: safe room, locked door. They're watching, don't trust. Each broadcast was like a breath from some hidden place, a glimpse into a dark undercurrent beneath the snow-covered town. At one point, Miss Harper, the station manager, and one of the few adults I still trusted, stopped by to check on me. Her silver hair caught the flickering light as she stepped inside, concern etched in her eyes. I played her the recording, watching her face pale as the strange voice crackled through the speakers. "Riley," she said slowly, "this frequency, it's been silent for years. No one's broadcast on it since the 70s. There were rumors back then about disappearances, about strange signals caught late at night. Folks said it was cursed. I swallowed hard, the weight of her words settling over me like the snow outside. Was this some old ghost story, or something far worse? The storm raged on beyond the walls, and the dead frequency kept calling, whispering secrets I wasn't sure I wanted to hear. I sat back down, glancing once more at the glowing dial. The snowstorm had shut the world out, but inside this little booth, the airwaves were alive with a strange, unnatural pulse. Whatever was broadcasting on 91.6 FM, it was here, watching, waiting, and I was the only one who could hear it. As the night deepened, the transmissions grew more frequent, more urgent. The static swirled like a living thing, and the voice, now a chilling murmur just beneath the surface, spoke of things I couldn't yet understand. I felt the cold fingers of isolation curl tighter around my heart, but with them came a spark of something else, a burning need to uncover the truth behind the signal. I reached for the microphone, debating whether to share this strange discovery with the town or keep it to myself. The silence in the studio was thick, broken only by the faint crackle on the frequency and the relentless howl of the storm outside. And then the static shifted. A new message came through, clear and unmistakable. "Riley, you're next." The microphone slipped from my hand, clattering to the floor, my breath caught in my throat. The voice wasn't just a ghost in the wires. It was speaking to me. Outside, the snow continued to fall, thick and unyielding, as if the world itself had frozen in place. Inside the radio booth, time seemed to slow, the thin line between reality and nightmare blurring with every crackle on the airwaves. And somewhere deep in the static, the dead frequency waited. The snow had been relentless for days now, a thick, unyielding blanket smothering every road, every tree, every rooftop in our little town of Havenbrook. It was the kind of storm that made the world outside seem like a distant memory, muffled and unreachable. I sat behind the battered console of WHTN-FM, the only late-night voice left awake in this frozen silence. The station's equipment hummed softly, the only sound besides the occasional gusts rattling the windows. The dead airwaves of 91.6 FM remained my obsession. It had started as a curiosity, a faint crackle buried in the static during my shift. Tonight, that crackle was different, clearer, more insistent. I adjusted the dial slowly, trying to isolate the frequency. The voice emerged from the haze, whispering, almost pleading, "Maggie Collins will vanish at midnight." My heart knocked against my ribs. Maggie, the girl I'd grown up with, my closest friend since grade school. I shook my head, telling myself it was interference, some weird radio anomaly, but the voice repeated, this time with a chilling clarity. "Maggie Collins will vanish at midnight." My fingers trembled as I noted the time on the clock, 11:47 p.m. I grabbed my coat and dashed through the station's back door into the biting cold, the snow crunching beneath my boots. The streets were deserted, the town swallowed whole by the storm's roar. I headed toward Maggie's house, the place we'd spent countless afternoons in front of the crackling fire, sharing dreams and secrets. Approaching her porch, the wind bit my cheeks raw. The front door stood slightly ajar, the cold air swirling inside like an invitation or a warning. I called her name, voice hoarse and cracking. No answer. I pushed the door open further, stepping inside the dimly lit house. The living room was empty, untouched, her coat hung by the door, boots neatly lined up. But Maggie was gone. Panic clutched at me. I sprinted back to the station, desperate to reach anyone. The phone lines were dead, the storm having severed all connections beyond our snowbound bubble. I was alone. Back in the station, I scanned the radio again, and the voice returned, this time calmly stating, "Eli Harper, your family will be next." I dropped the receiver, my breath freezing in the cold room. The broadcasts weren't just predictions, they were warnings. And worse, they were coming true. Over the next days, each message on 91.6 FM chilled me to the bone. Accidents that had once seemed like tragic chance were now scripted by that ghostly voice. Old Man Parker's tractor accident, Sheriff Brackett's deputy disappearing in the woods, and more, all foretold, all exact. I tried reaching out to the sheriff, pounding on his office door through a swirling blizzard. When he finally opened it, snow melting off his hat, his eyes were cold and skeptical. "You're chasing ghosts, Eli," he said gruffly. "This storm's got everyone on edge. There's no signal, no broadcasts, just static." I pleaded with him, tried to explain the voices, the predictions, the vanishings, but he just shook his head, dismissing me as a scared kid losing grip. Isolation wrapped around me tighter than the snow outside. Friends stopped showing up at school, families disappeared without a trace. The town seemed to hold its breath, frozen in place, waiting for the next signal. Nights at the station grew unbearable. The voice on 91.6 FM was no longer just a messenger. It felt alive, watching, knowing. It spoke to me directly now, whispering my name through the static, promising that my own fate was sealed. I sat in that cold, dimly lit room, the storm howling outside like a living thing. I was trapped, not just by snow, but by a voice from the void that knew too much, that predicted the end before it came. And as the clock edged toward midnight, I realized one terrifying truth. This wasn't just a broadcast, it was a countdown, a signal I couldn't escape. The snow kept falling, the voices kept calling, and Havenbrook held its breath. The snow had been falling for what felt like an eternity now, each flake a silent witness to the strange stillness that had settled over our town. From the cramped booth of the radio station, I peered out through the frost-smeared window, watching the world slow down, or maybe it had stopped altogether. A man in a thick coat was shoveling the same patch of sidewalk over and over, his movements stiff and mechanical, like one of those old black-and-white films stuck on a loop. His breath rose in jagged clouds, but his arms swung in a monotony that defied the very flow of time. The clock perched above my mixing board had stopped. Its second hand was frozen at 2:17 a.m., as if time itself had snapped on pause. Normally, I'd find a broken clock frustrating, but tonight it felt like a sinister signal, an emblem of the unnatural forces gripping our town. I glanced at my watch, still ticking, yet everything else seemed caught in a limbo. The snowstorm outside clawed at the windows, hurling icy needles of wind that rattled the thin panes. The roads were buried beneath unyielding drifts, and every attempt to reach beyond the town was met with silence. Phones were dead, radios static, and even the emergency services were unreachable. We were trapped. Then came the crackle on 91.6 FM, the dead frequency I'd stumbled upon days ago. It was louder now, a distorted voice weaving through the static, delivering messages that sent chills crawling up my spine. "Do not leave. Wait for the signal to break. The storm is endless." I shivered despite the layers of flannel and wool wrapped around me. The voice was urgent, fragmented, as if torn from somewhere deep beneath reality. I grabbed the microphone, my fingers trembling. "This is Alex Mercer, broadcasting live from KRTN. If anyone is out there, listen carefully. The storm is trapping us, and something unnatural is happening. Stay inside, stay safe." Static swallowed my words. The signal faltered, then died, leaving me alone with the howling wind and the weight of silence. Desperation clawed at me. I needed to reach someone, anyone, who could hear and understand. I grabbed my parka and stepped into the frozen night, the snow crunching beneath my boots as I made my way to Maggie's house. She was one of the few left, her family having vanished one by one like shadows swallowed by the storm. At her doorstep, she opened the door with a face pale as the snow. "Alex," she whispered, "the clock stopped again. Time, it's not right. I keep seeing people moving in circles like they're stuck in a loop." We huddled by the fireplace, its feeble glow barely holding back the oppressive cold. She told me about the man at the diner who kept pouring coffee into a cup that never emptied, the school bus frozen mid-turn on Main Street. The town was trapped in an endless moment, every frozen frame a testament to a creeping, spectral paralysis. Back at the station, I tried again to send out a warning, to break through the invisible barrier enclosing us. The microphone hissed, and then the dead frequency burst alive once more. The storm is the cage. The signal is the key. My heart hammered against my ribs as the voice faded into a sinister silence. I sank into my chair, the weight of the storm pressing down like a living thing. Outside, the snowstorm raged on, relentless and merciless, swallowing the town whole. And in the silence that followed, I realized with a sinking dread that time wasn't just frozen, it was a prison. And I was trapped inside with it. But what was the price of escape? And who or what held the key? The chill of the winter night seeped through the cracked window panes of the radio station's back room, where the faint glow of a single desk lamp fought off the surrounding darkness. I sat hunched over an aging wooden crate, my fingers trembling slightly as I brushed away decades of dust to reveal a faded label. Signal 91.6, 1967, it read in brittle ink. My heartbeat quickened. This was it, the link I'd been searching for. The frequency wasn't just a ghost in the static, it had a history steeped in the same eerie disappearances and tragedies that had gripped our town now. The air was thick, with the musty scent of old paper and moldy tape reels, the kind you only find buried in forgotten corners. As I carefully lifted the reel from its resting place, the radio station around me seemed to hold its breath. The hum of the ancient equipment was a constant backdrop, but tonight it carried a different weight, an ominous undertone. I slid the reel onto the player, fingers hesitating over the controls. The machine groaned awake, spitting out a few seconds of static before the crackled voice of a long-past broadcaster cut through the room. This is WNTR 91.6 FM. Reporting from Frostville, the heart of winter's grasp. The voice was calm, but carried an eerie resonance, as if the speaker knew the darkness lurking beneath the snow-covered town. The broadcast recounted a disappearance, an unexplained vanishing of a local man named Harold Jennings, lost without a trace on a night much like this one, over 50 years ago. The details were chillingly precise, mentioning the same roads now blocked by snow and the same howling wind that rattled the station's loose window panes. My pulse thudded painfully in my ears as I leaned closer to the speaker. Suddenly, the fluorescent lights overhead flickered violently, plunging the room into brief darkness before sputtering back to life. The tape player hissed, distorting the voice into a ghostly wail that sent a shiver down my spine. I blinked hard and found my vision blurring at the edges, the room seeming to stretch and warp, a trick of the light or something far more sinister. A sharp rap at the door startled me. I jumped up, nearly knocking over a stack of tapes. Jim Calloway, the station manager, stepped inside, his face drawn tight with concern. "Alex," he said, voice low, "you've been holed up in here all night." "You okay?" I forced a smile, brushing off his worry. "Just chasing ghosts, Jim," he nodded, understanding more than I said. "Be careful with those old tapes. This station's got a lot of history, some of it better left buried." Later that day, I found myself walking through the dim, cluttered aisles of the town's historical society, seeking out anyone who might shed light on the strange broadcasts. That's where I met Mrs. Evelyn Hart, the town's historian and a former radio operator whose memory stretched back decades. Her small frame was wrapped in layers of wool, and her eyes sparkled with a mix of sadness and resolve. She led me to a dusty cabinet filled with brittle documents and yellowed photographs, each a silent witness to Frostville's haunted past. "You've stumbled into something old and dangerous," she whispered, as she handed me a faded photograph of a radio tower half buried in snow. "The frequency you're chasing, it's tied to more than just radio waves. It's tied to the people who vanished here, to the town itself." Her voice trembled as she spoke of tragedies long swept under the snow, families torn apart, voices lost in the blizzard, and a radio signal that echoed their anguish through time. That night back at the station, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The old equipment sputtered erratically, the dials spinning on their own as if possessed. The lights flickered in uneven pulses, casting long shadows that danced along the peeling walls. As I scanned the frequency, the ghostly transmissions grew louder, more insistent. Suddenly, my reflection caught my eye in the glass of the control panel, but it wasn't just me staring back. Behind my image, fleeting and translucent, were faces faces marked by pain and fear, mouths open in silent screams. My breath caught in my throat. Was it a trick of the light, or had the past truly reached through the veil to touch me? I reached out, fingers trembling, and the faces vanished like mist. The broadcast crackled into silence, leaving only the hum of the machines and the cold pressing against the windows. I sat back, heart pounding, grappling with the terrifying realization. The frequency wasn't just a channel for voices lost in time, it was a bridge. A bridge to the tragedies buried beneath the snow, and perhaps a prison for the souls trapped in an endless loop of suffering. And I was standing right in the middle of it. But the signal wasn't finished with me yet. Somewhere beyond the static, a deeper secret waited to be uncovered, one that could either save us or doom us all. As the wind howled outside and the snow piled higher against the station's walls, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I wasn't just listening to history, I was becoming part of it, and there was no turning back now. The vanishing the snow had been falling without pause for what felt like an eternity, each flake a cold whisper against the windowpane of the small radio station where I sat, wrapped in a threadbare blanket, clutching the microphone like a lifeline. Outside, the world was swallowed in white, the streets of our town erased beneath the relentless blizzard. Inside, the only light came from the flickering console and the faded green glow of the frequency dial that seemed to mock me with its stubborn stillness. I had been running the late-night shift for days now, caught in a cyclone of static and unease. The dead frequency, 91.6 FM, had become an obsession, a siren pulling me deeper into the unknown. At first, I thought the crackling voices were nothing more than interference, echoes of some forgotten broadcast. But then the messages began to take shape, names and dates, cryptic warnings that chilled me to the bone. That night the voice came through again, distorted and slow like a ghost struggling to speak. "Maggie Clark, lost to the storm, do not look away." I froze, heart pounding. Maggie, my friend, my anchor in this frozen wasteland. The name echoed in my mind, a bell tolling doom. The hours crawled by, and when I finally left the station to check on her, the house was empty. No sign of struggle, no footprints in the snow. Just silence, as if she had been swallowed whole by the storm itself. My attempts to call her cell went unanswered, the lines dead. It was impossible, and yet the broadcast had predicted it. Panic clawed at my throat. Was this some sick prophecy, or worse, was the signal causing these vanishings? The thought was unbearable, but the evidence was mounting. Each name whispered over 91.6 FM was followed by disappearance. Friends, neighbors, people I had known my whole life. Sheriff Tom Willis came by the station the next day, his face drawn and grim. "Alex," he said, voice low, "I don't know what's going on, but people are scared. More have gone missing since that blasted signal started." I shared what I'd heard, but even the sheriff seemed to hesitate, the weight of the inexplicable pressing down on us both. The storm outside howled like a living thing, and inside, the radio crackled with its relentless, otherworldly pulse. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the vacant eyes of those vanished, felt the cold grip of the unknown tightening around our town. Time felt broken, the same frozen moments stretching on endlessly. The broadcasts grew more urgent, the voice shifting from cryptic warnings to direct commands. I tried to ignore them, to turn off the radio, but the signal wouldn't die. It was alive, feeding on fear and isolation. One night the voice said my name, "Alex Mercer, the last to fade. Will you heed the call?" I slammed the microphone down, breath coming in ragged gasps. Was I next? Or was I the key to ending this nightmare? The blizzard raged on, the town shrinking under its icy grip, swallowed by the storm and the sinister sound waves emanating from 91.6 FM. I was trapped in a loop of terror and silence, a prisoner to a signal that promised only oblivion. But I wasn't ready to vanish, not yet. And as dawn broke weakly against the storm, I knew the fight was just beginning. The radio booth was colder than it had any right to be, a thin layer of frost creeping along the edges of the window pane, where the relentless snowstorm outside battered the old building. My breath fogged the glass as I leaned closer to the console, fingers hovering over the dials that, until now, had been my only tether to the outside world. The soft hum of the transmitter filled the room, a constant reminder that I was alone. Wrongly so, it seemed, given what was happening on 91.6 FM. Weeks ago, this frequency had been dead, a ghost channel lost in the static. Now it spoke. Or rather, it whispered, crackled, and sometimes screamed warnings that no one else seemed to hear, warnings I could no longer ignore. Every prediction it made had come true, each vanishing, each death, like a tape rolling forward with cruel precision. Tonight, the storm had reached a crescendo, a howling fury that had cut off even the faintest hope of rescue or escape. Roads were buried under mountains of snow, phones were dead, and the town was a frozen island. But inside this tiny room, I had a plan, a dangerous, reckless plan to fight back. I adjusted the frequency dial carefully, hunting for the exact signal source. The broadcast came through again, that distorted voice, chilling and fragmentary. Listen, control. I reached out and turned the power knob on the auxiliary transmitter, feeding a countersignal into the airwaves. At first, nothing happened. Then, the static exploded, a violent roar that rattled the walls and sent a needle on the meter swinging wildly. My heart hammered in my chest. "Who are you?" I demanded into the microphone, voice shaking but firm. "What do you want with this town?" For a moment, silence. Then a voice, low and cold, emerged from the static, not a human voice, but something else, something ancient and cruel. "I am the echo of what was buried, the keeper of the frozen time." The room grew colder still, the lights flickering as the equipment surged erratically. I stumbled back, eyes wide. "What do you mean? You cannot break what binds this place. The storm holds it, and I am the signal that keeps the cycle turning." I swallowed hard, a wave of dread washing over me, but beneath that fear was something else, an ember of defiance. "If you're the signal, then I'm the breaker." I twisted the dials, sending bursts of interference, trying to jam the frequency to drown out the voice. The response was immediate. The signal warped, becoming a cacophony of voices, screams, and laughter, a twisted choir that clawed at my sanity. Lights flickered faster, the hum of the transmitter turning into a high-pitched whine that stabbed my ears. Suddenly, the howling outside began to quiet. The snowstorm's rage diminished, the wind's fury abating as if the entity's grip was loosening. I felt a flicker of hope, but it was fragile, like the last candle flickering in a dark room. Then the equipment sparked violently, a shower of tiny flames licking the edge of the console. I slammed my hand down, cutting the power just before the whole station could catch fire. Silence fell, thick and suffocating. I sank into the chair, breath ragged, sweat chilling on my skin. The voice was gone, the frequency dead once more, or at least it seemed so. But I knew better. The signal was still there, waiting, watching. And I was closer than ever to the truth. The source of this nightmare wasn't some distant force. It was here, inside the town, buried beneath the ice and snow, a secret screaming for release. The storm was fading, but the danger was only beginning. I closed my eyes, listening to the faint crackle of static, and whispered, "I'm coming for you." Outside, the snow softened to a whisper, but inside my heart, the storm raged on. The night wore on, the silence after the storm's angry retreat almost deafening. I stayed at the console, eyes scanning every meter, every gauge, searching for any sign of life on the frequency. The air felt charged, electric, as if the whole station was holding its breath. Minutes passed like hours. Then, from the depths of the static, a single word emerged, clear, deliberate, and chilling. "Return," I shivered, knowing the signal was not done with me. The battle for the town's soul was far from over, but I was ready. I had to be. I stood at the edge of the cellar's rusted iron stairs, my breath fogging in the frigid air as the blizzard outside screamed against the radio station's battered walls. The faint hum of the 91.6 FM frequency pulsed like a heartbeat beneath the floorboards, calling me down into the cold dark where the past gripped the present with icy fingers. Mara's flashlight cut through the shadows, its beam trembling as much as our nerves. "This has to be where it all started," I whispered, descending the steps with a weight settling in my chest that wasn't just from the cold. The cellar was a forgotten tomb beneath the station, filled with decades-old tapes, broken transmitters, and dust thick enough to taste. As I fumbled for the source of the strange broadcast, my fingers brushed against a battered reel-to-reel player, its dials spinning slowly, powered by a force beyond the station's main generator. When I pressed play, a wash of distorted voices flooded the cramped space, fragments of calls, cries, and names, all layered one atop the other in a jarring cacophony. The air grew thicker, the temperature dropping further until it felt like the breath of the vanished townsfolk surrounded us. "Do you hear that?" Mara's voice was barely a whisper, eyes wide as shadows flickered at the edges of the beam. I nodded, heart hammering. "It's them, the voices from the broadcasts, they're here." The tapes revealed a story buried beneath the snow and silence. Decades ago, a tragedy had struck this town, erased from memory but etched into the airwaves. A fire, a collapse, a sudden blizzard that trapped the town in a frozen moment of terror. The victims' final cries had been caught on this very frequency, their suffering looping endlessly, bleeding into the present like a spectral wound. Outside, the storm had not abated. It was as if time itself had been frozen, caught in a relentless cycle with us trapped inside. I remembered the townsfolk I'd seen earlier, their movements stilted and repetitive, faces blank as if caught in a broken record. Mara and I ventured out to the square, where the snow was undisturbed except for the faintest echoes of footsteps that vanished before they could be followed. There they were, trapped bodies shifting and resetting, flickering like ghosts caught between moments. I reached out, my hand trembling, to a woman who blinked slowly, eyes empty. "Help us," she mouthed, a silent plea that chilled me deeper than the cold. The radio crackled suddenly, the broadcast shifting tones, the voices merging into a single, commanding presence, a force older than the town, feeding on fear and frozen time. It whispered secrets of the cycle, of how the broadcasts were not just predictions, but bindings, chains forged by tragedy and amplified by isolation. I realized then that to break the loop, to free the town and myself, I'd have to confront this force directly. Back in the cellar, the air thickened into a vortex of ice and sound, the past and present colliding in a storm of snowflakes that danced like restless spirits. The apparition of the tragedy took form, a swirling mass of light and shadow, voice echoing with sorrow and rage. "Stay," it urged, "become part of the signal, the eternal echo." But I gritted my teeth, heart pounding with a mix of dread and defiance. "No," I said, voice steady despite the cold clawing at my lungs. "This cycle ends now." The final moments blurred, sound waves crashing like waves, snowflakes cutting like shards of glass. But somewhere in the chaos, I felt the loop begin to unravel, the voices fading, the storm's grip loosening. Mara's hand found mine, warm and real, anchoring me back from the edge. As the signal dimmed, a silence deeper than any I'd known settled over the town. Yet in that silence, I could still hear a faint whisper, a lingering echo of my own voice trapped somewhere on 91.6 FM, a reminder that some stories never fully end. The blizzard outside softened, the first fragile light of dawn breaking through the gray. But I knew the town's soul was forever marked, caught between past and present, signal and silence. And I, forever the DJ at the edge of that frozen broadcast, was its keeper and its prisoner. The cold had not yet released its hold, but maybe, just maybe, the endless loop was broken, or at least paused. I switched off the radio, the static fading into a hush that felt like a breath held too long. Outside, the snow gleamed under the pale morning light, and I stepped forward, uncertain if I was walking toward freedom or deeper into the echoes. The signal was fading, but I could still feel its pull, like a heartbeat beneath the ice, waiting. The storm had reached its crescendo when I finally understood what I had to do. The radio station, my sanctuary and my prison, felt like it was trembling under the weight of the howling wind outside. Snow pounded against the windows like a relentless drum, the world beyond reduced to a swirling white void. I sat alone in the cramped booth, the glow of the console casting long shadows over my tired face. The dial hovered on 91.6 FM, the frequency that had consumed my nights and invaded my every thought. The voice was back again, distorted, layered, a spectral chorus weaving through the static. It spoke in riddles and half-truths, promising knowledge, power, and doom. But now, beneath the cryptic warnings and predictions, I sensed something else. A desperate plea, a trap, a snare for anyone who dared listen too closely. I adjusted the knobs, trying to jam the transmission, to drown out the voice that had haunted me for weeks. The equipment groaned in protest, sparks flickering across the control panel. The air grew thick, charged with an otherworldly energy that made my skin prickle and my heart race. Then, as if summoned by my defiance, the voice shifted, softer, almost sorrowful, but no less commanding. "You cannot run," it whispered, twisting the static into a chilling lullaby. "You belong to us now." A cold shiver ran down my spine. I gripped the microphone, my breath visible in the icy air of the station. Outside, the streets lay empty, frozen in time. I thought of Mara, her fiery hair disappearing into the blizzard hours ago, the last warm breath of life left in this town. My friends, my family, they were all gone, swallowed by the relentless snow and the sinister signal that bound us. But I refused to surrender. If this voice was the pulse that kept the storm alive, then I would sever it at its source, even if it cost me everything. I began a final broadcast, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. "This is the end," I said, speaking into the microphone as the static thickened around me. "To whoever is out there, listening, this signal stops now." The equipment overloaded, lights flickering wildly. The station felt like it was being torn apart from the inside. The voice screamed, a cacophony of anguish and rage, then fractured into 1,000 shards of silence. In that moment, I felt myself slipping away, consciousness dissolving into the frequency I had fought so hard to silence. The station, the town, the storm, all began to unravel. When I came to, the blizzard had ceased. A tentative morning light filtered through the clouds, melting the snow that had imprisoned us. Streets slowly filled with cautious footsteps, faces blinking against the weak sun. The frozen time was broken, but I was no longer among them. My voice, my essence, was trapped on 91.6 FM, a faint echo drifting on the dead airwaves, a ghostly whisper in the static. And as the town awoke from its nightmare, I remained, a signal lost, a memory frozen forever in the silence after the storm.